Okay, so get ready for a really tough one today.
Yeah.
We're diving into the death of Robert Brooks,
Hmm.
an inmate at Marcy Correctional Facility in New York.
Right.
And we've got a lot to work with here.
Yeah, we do.
We've got news articles, video footage,
Hmm.
and a whole bunch of official statements.
Right.
And honestly,
Yeah.
it's all pointing to a pretty disturbing incident.
Yeah, it is.
So, in this deep dive,
Mhm.
we're going to try to piece together exactly what happened to Robert Brooks.
Right.
We'll look at all this evidence, the different reactions, and then see what this case might tell us about the bigger picture.
I think that's really important with this case.
Yeah.
To look at the bigger picture.
For sure.
What's striking about this case is how it's really sparked this whole debate about prison conditions and the use of force.
Right.
You know, the footage is hard to watch.
Yeah.
But it gives us a glimpse into a world that we just don't often see.
Definitely a heavy one.
Yeah.
So to start, can you tell us a bit about who Robert Brooks was?
So, Robert Brooks was 43 years old,
Okay.
and he was serving a 12-year sentence for first-degree assault.
Okay.
And he was actually transferred from Mohawk Correctional Facility to Marcy on December 9th,
Okay.
which is actually the same day as this incident.
The same day as the incident?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And he died the next day on December 10th.
So literally the day after he was transferred. That's
Yeah, it's not
not a great sign.
Not a great sign, no.
So can we rewind a little and go through exactly what happened during this incident?
So the New York Attorney General Letitia James actually released the body cam footage.
Okay.
And it's graphic.
Yeah.
It shows officers repeatedly hitting Brooks
Mm-hmm.
in the face and the groin while he's handcuffed
Wow.
on an examination table.
Jeez.
There's also footage of them seemingly putting something in his mouth before hitting him again.
Oh, wow.
And at one point, they even strike him with a shoe.
That's brutal.
Yeah.
Do we know anything about what led up to all of this?
So the footage doesn't have audio.
Okay.
So we're missing like a big piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, a crucial piece.
Yeah.
We see the violence.
Right.
But we don't know what was said or what exactly happened in the moments right before the officers started hitting him.
Right.
You mentioned an examination table.
Yes.
So was he receiving medical attention at the time?
Yes. And that's another disturbing part of this footage.
Okay.
One officer is seen lifting Brooks by the neck
Okay.
and then forcing him back down onto the table.
Lifting him by the neck.
Yes. And the preliminary findings actually list the cause of death as asphyxia due to compression of the neck.
So basically he suffocated
Exactly.
because someone was pressing on his neck.
Yes.
And that seems to directly connect the officer's actions with his death.
Exactly. And the full autopsy report is still pending.
Okay.
But those initial findings definitely raise questions about the level of force that was used.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming this incident had some immediate consequences?
Yes. Within the prison. Yeah, 13 officers and a prison nurse were suspended right away.
Wow.
And one officer resigned.
That's
Yeah.
a pretty serious response.
That gives you an idea of how seriously they were taking the situation, even within the correctional system itself.
Suspending that many people at once is definitely a statement.
Mm-hmm.
So what have the official responses been like to the video and the incident?
Well, Attorney General James actually chose to release that video,
Right.
and that's a big decision,
Especially right before the holidays, too.
especially right before the holidays.
Yeah.
And she said that she felt that it was important to be transparent and accountable,
Okay.
not just to Brooks's family, but to everyone.
It's interesting that she chose to release it then.
Yeah.
Because it could have easily been buried until after the holidays.
Easily.
So it seems like she was trying to make a statement.
Yeah.
What about the governor?
Yeah, so Governor Hochul
How has she responded?
was outraged,
Okay.
and she made that very clear. She wants accountability, and she emphasized a zero-tolerance policy for anyone breaking the law,
Okay.
no matter their job.
Okay.
And this isn't her first statement about violence within prisons either.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she's been pushing for reforms for a while.
Okay.
And this incident seems to have just strengthened her resolve.
So even before this, she was vocal about changes being needed
Yeah.
in the prison system.
Yes.
Interesting.
Mm.
What about Brooks's family? Have they released any statements?
Their lawyer, Elizabeth Mazur, called the attack horrific
Okay.
and stressed how important safety is within prisons.
Yeah.
It raises a really important point.
Okay.
What's the purpose of prison?
Right.
Is it punishment?
Mm-hmm.
Is it rehabilitation?
Yeah.
Or is it both?
Right.
And how do we make sure that people are safe while they're serving their sentences?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
And it seems like a lot of people are asking that right now,
Sure.
especially given everything that came out in that 2023 report from the Correctional Association of New York.
That's right.
Can you remind us a bit about what was in that report?
That report found a lot of claims of racial discrimination and mistreatment by staff in New York's prison system.
Okay.
There were stories of Black inmates not being allowed into the mess hall.
Wow.
Because of their hairstyles.
Denying basic needs.
Yeah.
Like food based on hairstyle.
Yeah.
It's
awful.
It's really awful.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder what else might be happening behind closed doors that we just don't know about.
It really does.
Yeah.
And it leads to the question, is the Robert Brooks incident just this one terrible event?
Right.
Or is it a symptom of a bigger problem?
So we've got the Attorney General pushing for transparency, the governor demanding change, and reports of these widespread problems in the prison system.
Right.
But what about the perspective of the correctional officers themselves?
Well, the New York State Correctional Officers and Police Benevolent Association,
Okay.
which is the union for prison workers, released a statement.
Okay.
They called the incident incomprehensible,
Okay.
but said it doesn't reflect their entire workforce.
It's understandable that they'd want to defend their members,
Yeah.
but it also feels like a bit of a deflection.
It's definitely a delicate situation.
Right.
On the one hand, it's important to remember that not every officer is corrupt or abusive.
Of course.
But on the other hand, we can't ignore the systemic issues that allow these kinds of things to happen.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So are there any groups calling for more systemic changes?
Yeah, the ACLU, for example, has a very different take on the situation.
Okay.
They argue that this wasn't just a few bad apples,
Okay.
but evidence of this widespread culture of violence
Okay.
and a lack of accountability within the prison system. They're pushing for major reforms
Okay.
to address what they see as this deeply rooted problem.
So you've got the union saying it's an isolated incident,
Yeah,
and the ACLU saying it's a systemic problem.
exactly.
That's a pretty big gap in perspectives.
It certainly highlights the complexity of the issue.
Yeah.
There are a lot of different viewpoints,
Right.
and it's important to consider all of them as we try to understand what happened and how to prevent it from happening again.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
There are a lot of people who are directly impacted by this case,
absolutely.
and they all have their own perspective.
Yes,
We need to make sure that everyone's voice is heard.
for sure.
What about the protests
Yeah.
and calls for justice reform?
There have been a lot of protests
Okay.
and calls for change. People are demanding more oversight and accountability
Okay.
within the prison system.
Okay.
They don't want this to be swept under the rug.
Yeah.
They want justice for Robert Brooks,
Right.
and they want to see real changes to prevent this kind of thing from happening again.
Yeah, it seems like this incident has really struck a nerve with a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's not just about one man's death.
Right.
It's about these larger issues of justice and how we treat people in our care,
Yeah.
even when they're incarcerated.
Absolutely. This case has brought a lot of uncomfortable truths to light,
Right.
and people are demanding answers and action.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So where does the investigation stand right now?
As of today, December 31st, 2024,
Okay.
none of the officers involved have been formally charged.
Okay.
There are ongoing investigations, though,
Okay. By who?
by the State Attorney General's office, the FBI,
Okay.
and the Department of Justice.
So multiple agencies are looking into this.
That's right.
What's the difference between those investigations?
So the State Attorney General's office is handling the immediate investigation
Okay.
to determine if any state laws were broken.
Okay.
The FBI isn't involved because there could be federal civil rights violations.
Okay.
And the Department of Justice might step in
Okay.
if they see a pattern of abuse
Okay.
that needs to be addressed at a federal level.
So depending on what each agency finds, there could be different legal consequences for the officers involved.
It's a complex case,
Yeah.
and it will take time to sort through all the evidence and determine the appropriate course of action.
So Governor Hochul hasn't just been talking about change.
Yeah,
She's actually been taking some steps as well.
she has.
What has she done?
She ordered the Department of Corrections to appoint a new superintendent at Marcy,
Okay.
and she's also allocated funds for cameras
Okay.
in all state prisons.
So she's really trying to tackle this from multiple angles,
It seems so.
which is good.
Yeah.
Those are both really positive steps.
Yeah, a new superintendent could mean a change in leadership and culture at Marcy.
Okay.
And cameras can provide more transparency and accountability,
Right.
which is something that's clearly needed.
It sounds like she's trying to address both the immediate situation at Marcy and then the bigger systemic issues as well.
Yes.
Which is good, but it's just the beginning.
It's just the big...
There's a lot more work to be done to ensure that something like this never happens again.
You're absolutely right.
This is a long road.
Yeah.
And it'll require sustained effort from everyone involved.
Everyone involved.
Let's take a pause here.
Okay.
This is a lot to process.
Yeah.
And we'll continue our deep dive in the next segment.
Sounds good.
All right.
Okay.
See you then.
See you then.
Okay, so we're back.
Yeah.
And I have to say, diving into this case is bringing up a lot of emotions.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to watch that footage and not feel angry and heartbroken.
It's definitely a difficult case.
Yeah.
And it raises so many questions about how our prison system works.
You know, one of the things that's really sticking with me is how the officers reacted.
Right.
Brooks was already handcuffed and restrained.
Yeah.
Why not try to de-escalate the situation, before resorting to that level of violence?
That's one of the most disturbing aspects of this case.
Yeah.
There seems to have been just this complete lack of de-escalation techniques.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder about the training that these officers received.
Right.
Were they ever taught how to calm a situation down without using force?
That's a good point. What does effective de-escalation training even look like for correctional officers?
Well, ideally, it would go beyond just physical restraint techniques.
Okay.
It should include communication skills, conflict resolution strategies, and how to recognize signs of mental distress.
Right.
Correctional officers are dealing with a population that often has complex needs and trauma histories. So understanding how to interact with them in a way that de-escalates tension is crucial.
Yeah, it's not just about, controlling inmates. It's about managing complex situations and potentially helping those individuals.
Right.
And it's not just about protecting the inmates either.
Right.
De-escalation techniques can protect the officers, too.
Exactly.
If they can resolve a situation peacefully, it's safer for everyone.
It's safer for everyone involved.
So inadequate training could be a factor in this case.
Yeah.
But what about the overall culture at Marcy?
Right.
Do you think this incident points to, a larger pattern of abuse or excessive force?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
The report from the Correctional Association of New York.
Right.
With all those claims of racial discrimination and mistreatment.
Yeah.
Certainly suggests that there might be deeper issues at play.
Yeah. And it's hard not to think about those reports in light of Brooks being a black man.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen so many instances of brutality against black people.
Absolutely.
Both within the justice system and outside of it.
You're right.
It's hard not to see the potential connections.
Systemic racism is a pervasive issue that affects every aspect of our society.
Yeah.
And the prison system is unfortunately no exception.
For sure.
It's crucial to acknowledge that an inmate's race, socioeconomic background, and other factors can play a role in their experiences within the system.
So how do we even begin to disentangle all of these issues and figure out what needs to change? It seems so overwhelming.
It is overwhelming.
Yeah.
But we have to start somewhere.
Okay, so where do we start?
Well, one place to start is by looking at the history of the officers involved.
Okay.
There are reports that some of them were previously named in lawsuits.
Oh, wow.
Alleging attacks on other inmates.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah.
So there were potentially warning signs that were ignored.
That's what we need to find out.
Wow.
If there's a pattern of violence associated with specific officers, it raises huge red flags about the oversight and accountability within the prison.
It begs the question, why were these officers allowed to continue working with inmates if there were already these allegations against them?
Right.
Yeah, it's like that old saying, where there's smoke, there's fire.
Exactly.
You have to wonder how many other incidents might have been swept under the rug.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to have a system in place that takes these allegations of abuse seriously.
Right.
There needs to be a robust internal investigation process and a way to track complaints against officers.
It sounds like we need more transparency, both within the prison and from the outside.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Independent oversight bodies play a crucial role in holding correctional facilities accountable.
Okay.
They need the authority to conduct thorough investigations, issue public reports, and recommend changes to the system.
What about the impact on the other inmates at Marcy?
Yeah.
I can't imagine witnessing something like that wouldn't have a lasting effect.
You're right.
Yeah.
Imagine living in an environment where you're constantly afraid for your safety.
Right.
That kind of fear and distrust can be incredibly damaging,
Yeah.
both mentally and emotionally.
It kind of undermines the whole purpose of rehabilitation, right? Like,
Yeah.
how can someone focus on turning their life around?
Right. When they're living in this constant state of fear.
It's a major obstacle.
Yeah.
And we have to remember that prisons are not just places of punishment.
Right.
They're also communities.
Right.
What happens to one person impacts everyone.
Right.
Both inmates and staff.
It's like a ripple effect.
Yeah.
The violence doesn't stay contained.
Right.
It spreads outward and affects the whole environment.
It's a good analogy.
Yeah.
You know, this case has clearly sparked outrage
Mm-hmm.
and calls for justice.
Yeah.
Not just for Robert Brooks,
Right.
but for a more humane and accountable prison system.
It seems like a lot of people are realizing that this isn't just an isolated incident.
Yeah.
It's a symptom of these larger issues that need to be addressed.
And that's a positive development.
Yeah.
You know, public awareness is crucial for driving change.
Right.
The more people understand the complexities of the prison system
Yeah.
and the challenges faced by both inmates and staff, the more likely we are to see real reform. Governor Hochul has taken some positive steps.
Yeah.
But what else needs to change to prevent tragedies like this from happening again?
Well, cameras are a good start,
Okay.
but they're not a solution in themselves.
Right.
We need to address the root causes of violence within prisons.
Okay, so what are some of those root causes?
Well, we've talked about training and oversight,
Right.
but we also need to look at the resources available to both inmates and staff.
Okay.
Are there enough mental health services?
Right.
Are there programs that help inmates develop life skills and prepare for re-entry into society?
Seems like those kinds of programs could make a huge difference in reducing recidivism.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Investing in rehabilitation,
Okay.
both inside and outside of prison, is crucial.
Yeah.
It's not just about punishing people.
Right.
It's about giving them the tools they need
Yeah.
to turn their lives around.
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
It's about seeing people as individuals, not just inmates.
Right. And recognizing that everyone,
Yeah.
regardless of their past mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
deserves a chance to change and build a better future.
Absolutely.
This deep dive has been incredibly eye-opening.
Yeah, it has.
And it's clear that there are no easy answers.
You're right.
Yeah.
This is a complex issue, and it's going to take a lot of hard work and collaboration to create real change.
Let's take one more pause here.
Okay.
In our final segment,
Yeah.
we'll explore some potential solutions
Okay.
and discuss what you, as an informed listener, can do to contribute to positive change.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
Yeah, we have.
The Robert Brooks case, the reactions, and all these systemic issues within the prison system. It's heavy stuff,
It is.
but it feels important to talk about.
It is, absolutely.
Shining a light on these issues is the first step towards creating change. So where do we go from here?
What can be done to ensure that what happened to Robert Brooks never happens again?
Well, we've touched on some important points already.
Yeah.
Training, oversight, resources.
Right.
But let's delve a little deeper into those.
Okay.
When it comes to training correctional officers,
Yeah.
we need to kind of shift the focus.
Okay. What do you mean?
Instead of just focusing on security and physical restraint, we need to prioritize de-escalation techniques,
Okay.
conflict resolution,
Right.
and cultural sensitivity training.
Yeah.
Officers need to be equipped to handle these challenging situations without resorting to violence.
So it's about giving them more tools for their toolbox.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We also need to make sure that officers are trained to recognize and respond to mental health crises.
Okay.
A large percentage of inmates struggle with mental health issues.
Right.
And officers need to know how to de-escalate those situations and get those individuals the help that they need.
It's about seeing the people behind the uniform.
Yeah.
Both the inmates and the officers.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's about creating a culture of respect and understanding within the prison environment.
What about the role of technology?
Right.
We've talked about body cameras.
Yeah.
But are there other technological solutions that could help?
There are some interesting developments in that area.
Okay.
For example, some prisons are starting to use artificial intelligence to analyze data and identify patterns of misconduct.
So AI could be used to flag potential problems.
Yeah.
before they escalate.
Exactly. It could help identify officers who might be at risk of using excessive force.
Okay.
Or areas within the prison where there are higher rates of violence.
So it's about being proactive.
Yes.
Rather than reactive.
It's not a perfect solution.
Right.
But it could be a valuable tool.
Okay.
For improving oversight and accountability.
It seems like technology could play a big role in making prisons safer.
It could.
But we have to be careful about how it's implemented.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that these technologies are used responsibly and ethically.
Right.
We don't want to create a surveillance state within prisons.
It's about finding that balance between safety and privacy.
Right.
What about the resources available to inmates? We talked about mental health services, but are there other areas where we need to see improvement?
We need to invest in programs that help inmates prepare for life after prison.
Okay, like what?
Things like job training, education, and substance abuse treatment.
Okay.
These programs can help reduce recidivism and give people a real chance to turn their lives around.
It's about setting people up for success.
Exactly.
Not setting them up to fail.
We need to shift our focus from punishment to rehabilitation.
That's a big shift.
It is.
It requires like a fundamental change in how we think about the purpose of prison.
It does, and it's not going to happen overnight.
Right.
But it's a change that we need to make if we want to create a more just and equitable society. Yeah.
This deep dive has really highlighted the fact that prison reform is a complex issue.
It is.
With no easy answers.
It is complex, but it's not insurmountable.
Okay.
There are things we can do,
both
individually and collectively, to push for change.
So what can our listeners do?
Well,
what actions can they take to make a difference?
Educate yourself about the issues.
Okay.
Support organizations that are working for prison reform. Contact your elected officials.
Right.
And let them know that this is an issue you care about.
Those are all great suggestions.
Yeah.
It's about using our voices and our actions to demand change.
Exactly. And it's about remembering that we're all part of this system.
Right.
The way we treat those who are incarcerated reflects our values as a society.
We can't just turn a blind eye to what's happening behind prison walls.
We can't.
We have a responsibility to speak up and advocate for a more just and humane system.
I think this case, as tragic as it is, has the potential to be a catalyst for real change. It's sparked a conversation that we need to keep having.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of difficult and emotional topics in this deep dive. It's easy to feel overwhelmed and hopeless.
Right.
But we want to leave you with a sense of hope and a call to action.
Change is possible.
Yes.
But it requires us to acknowledge the problems, to listen to the voices of those who are most affected, and to work together to create a better future.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We hope it sparked some new thoughts and inspired you to take action.